Good afternoon. Welcome to another T3. Becky Lemke is here today to talk about TABE refresher, to give a TABE refresher, but she wants this more to be an interactive session. So she's hoping you guys ask questions and come ready to help answer questions as well. So Becky, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I want this to be a sharing session, not a me talking session. So I've got just, I have very minimal slides, right? And I'm going to pause often for you all to ask any questions you have or give any insight and tips that you have, because there's a lot of people on here who have done this basically as long as me. I feel silly looking at who's on here, introducing myself again, but I am Becky Lemke. I'm the education coordinator at Cornerstones. I'm part of the South Dakota Professional Development Team, and I am a 22-year veteran of TABE testing. When I started TABE testing, it was the TABE 7-8. So some of you don't even remember the TABE 7-8. Stephanie does. I know Stephanie does. I think there's probably maybe one or two other people on the call that probably do. I know Kim does.
That's when 10-year-olds could give it though. Proctor it.
Exactly right. I remember
7-8. I had 5-6 dudes. That's how old I am.
Started at Cornerstones. One of the things Kim told me was, she said there's some computer discs, right? The computer discs in your desk drawer that are for the TABE on the computer, TABE PC, not TABE online, but TABE PC. We don't know how it works. See if you can figure it out. So, or anything. So I just messed with it until I figured it out and loaded a test on the computer and took the test. And that was my first experience with TABE on a computer. So we've come a long way since then. And sometimes I wonder if maybe it wouldn't just be easier if we went backwards slightly, but we're not doing that. We're going to keep going forwards. So our objectives for today, right? We're going to do just a little bit of review for TABE administration basics. I want to take a look at the TABE online testing platform, the DRC platform. We've had some questions in the state over the last few weeks on this, which is one of the reasons I'm including it in here. Just maybe there's tips and tricks that I'm not sure everybody has discovered in the DRC platform, because the training through there is not great, in my opinion. And the ones that we were using, the certification trainings, are now pretty outdated based on the platform itself too. So just to go through there, and I've got a couple of things that I do for tricks, and I want everybody to share their own too. We're going to touch a little bit on the state assessment policy, just again as a review, and then we're leaving plenty of time today, discussion, questions, tips, all the way through, but definitely at the end as well. So we're not a huge group today. Feel free to flip your mic on and ask questions or share experiences whenever you've got them. You know, you won't hurt my feelings, right? So quick review of the basics, right? The locator test is not optional as part of the initial TABE test. You have to give the locator test prior to each subtest given. Even on the computer, you can give the locator tests in a group at the beginning of testing, or you can do the locator test before each subtest. So you can do the reading locator tests followed by reading part 1 and part 2, right? Then you can have them do the math locators followed by math part 1 and part 2. One of the things that I think we often forget to tell our students, though, especially when they're testing online, is it really is recommended that students not guess at the answers that they're not sure of during those locator tests. In the main part of the test, it's not as big of a deal, but in those locators, because there are fewer questions, if they're good at guessing, it can really skew locator results, and it can result in them taking a test that's too hard for them if they're good at guessing, because that locator score will be higher, and this can sometimes result in out of range test scores. So remind your students, don't guess on the locator questions. If you're sure, answer it. If you're wiffle waffling, maybe just leave it blank. Again, testing times have to be followed for all parts of the TABE test. This is a lot easier when you're doing the online version of the test, I will say. if you've had to do any paper pencils on TABE 11, 12, the test times are nutty. And I don't know how you ever keep track of them. So, but if you are doing paper and pencil testing though, have that test administration book out and follow those testing times. Because it is a standardized test and it is a high stakes test based on the fact that our student performance is based on those scores in large part. Okay. Students also have to have access to all the allowable tools and supports during testing. And there are a lot of tools and supports available to students, even if they do not have accommodations that they need documentation for. So again, that's one of the things we're going to look at a little bit later is some of those online testing tools and where to find those. Again, students need to be assessed using alternate forms of the TABE. So standard practice is to begin testing with Form 11 and then to follow with Form 12 for a post-test. And then if they need another one, go back to Form 11. Okay. Selecting the level for post-testing is not as clear-cut though, because depending again on student performance on that prior assessment, you might post-test at the same level as the pre-test. So if they've taken an 11M, you might give them a 12M for the post-test. Or if they've taken an 11M and scored at the high end of the range for that 11M, which is indicated on their score report by that plus sign after the number, right? They'll get their scale score and they'll have a little plus after it. That's a good indicator that you probably want to give them one level higher for their post-test. So if they took the 11M, say for their math, and their score had the plus after it on their pre-test, you'd probably want to give them the 12D for their post-test. Otherwise, you might get that out of range situation again because they're bumping up against the top of that level. Remember on the TABE 11, 12, you don't even get a scale score on NRS level for an out of range test. The score report just says OR for out of range instead of a score. And again, in my experience with TABE 11 and 12 especially, this generally means that the student has taken a test level that's too difficult for them to score in range and they need to be tested at a lower level. Has anybody seen one where they've taken one that's too easy and they need to bump up? Sarah asks a good question. If we give them a higher test, does that mess with them making gains on a post-test? No, it should not, because the scale scores overlap in those ranges. So especially if you're getting that scale score plus and you're thinking, okay, so I need to go up a level, they should still evidence a gain. They should still evidence a gain. That's a very good question. All right. Again, TABE is considered a high stakes test and therefore TABE testing materials and the online testing environment have to be kept secure. So that means you have to take away cell phones, smartwatches. You got to check their glasses even for recording devices, right? Nothing that contains a camera in the testing room. No paper carried into or out of the testing room by testers. All scratch paper or erasable noteboards collected by proctors after each session. If you're using physical scratch paper, it has to be destroyed. And again, never ever use a test question as a teaching example. Our students are famous for this, right? They don't know how to do them, especially it seems like math always. They don't know how to do a math problem. So they write down the math problem and then they bring you their scratch paper at the end and they're like, can you show me how to do this? And our instinct as teachers is to say, yeah, and to do it. But as soon as you work that problem out, you've invalidated that problem on the test. So don't do that. Look at what kind of problem it is, pull out your materials, find a similar one and show them how to do that one. Don't ever work out the answer to a problem that they've brought you from the actual test. Any questions or comments about that quick review of just TABE admin basics? Wait time. Okay. Next, I'm going to switch to the TABE or DRC online platform. If you're one of the people who enters students into the DRC platform, you might have noticed that the test management window is kind of an organizational nightmare. There is not a way to archive or remove any of your old test sessions. So if you delete a test session, you delete all the student records associated with that test session. So you lose that historical record of student results. So don't do that. But what happens then is you end up with this endless list of sessions to search through when you're trying to enroll a student. I'm actually going to and I'm going to pull my window over here so you can see it. So I have some visual cues for you. So I'm going to go to test management on my DRC screen. Manage test sessions. Come on. Ooh, it's actually, I shouldn't even say it. Jinx myself now. I'm just going to hit show sessions, right? And this will just give you an idea of some of the crazy making that you see from test sessions. So I know this might be small for some of you, but I'm just going to give you just a look, right? Here are the Cornerstone's Career Learning Center test sessions from history, right? And it's just this whole screen of test sessions that I can scroll through. These are all test sessions. Not all of them are active. And there's 6 pages like that I could scroll through. So trying to find the active test session that you're trying to enroll a student into can be a little bit of a nightmare. So one of the things that we've done at Cornerstones is we create new test sessions every fiscal year, and every single one of them starts with FY and then the fiscal year. So right now we're in FY22. So if I just type in FY22 into session and hit the show sessions button, I'm going to think for a second. And then what you see is just one screen of Cornerstone's Career Learning Center test sessions. If I want to get even smarter about it, I can come down here to test and I can say, just show me the TABE 11 sessions. Hit show sessions. And now you can see all of them are TABE 11. You can also go in and rearrange these columns just by clicking on the header, right? So now I've A to Z'd it. And you can see one of the things that we've done in addition is we've got the fiscal year 22 TABE 11 complete battery. So that's exactly what it says. It's the complete battery. It's the locator tests and the reading, math, and language subtests. We've also got them split out. Like I've got just language A, language D, language E, language M. That's for post-testing purposes. And I've got sessions for 11 and 12 that are exactly the same. So that way, if I just want to give them a post-test in language and they took the 12D last time, I'm going to give them the 11D this time, and I can go in and do that. I also have test sessions that are like TABE 11 language only, TABE 11 math only. In those sessions, what you have is just language, but also the locator. So if there's a reason that you only want to do, you can see it's auto locator and just the language. If there's a reason that you only want to do one subject area with the locator, then you've got a session to do that too. Now, you don't have to do it the way we do it, right? I'm just showing you the Cornerstones screens for an example. So if you want to refer to it, you can definitely think about it in that way. Another reason we've organized it this way is so that we have a fresh slate of TABE sessions every fiscal year. That helps with our internal record keeping, number one, and searches. And I don't know if anybody else has discovered this, but one feature of the DRC platform is that you can't enroll the same student into the same test session more than once. So if a student starts on TABE 11 math level D, they post-test on TABE 12 math level D, and then they need to take an additional test, right? if you try and put them back into TABE 11 Math D, you can't enroll them again in that same session. So if your sessions cross over fiscal years, you might run into that. Doesn't seem like we have when we split them into fiscal years. Any questions about any of that? Anybody else have any really good tips about the way they organize their test sessions? I know Sarah from The Right Turn and I had a conversation about this because her dashboard was making her crazy. He says Kay is a master. Good job, Kay. What does she do, Steph?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get it to unmute, but no, Kay is just, she is the master of figuring out all of that, you know, just and paying attention to it. And sometimes she'll remind me, or she'll say, what do you think we should do here? Because I think this would be the right way to go. So yeah, I think, but it's real similar. Everything you're doing is very similar to what we're doing. So.
Yeah, and I think just having an organizational kind of framework in mind that everybody understands and can manage. Nikita mentioned in the chat, the sorting A to Z by session name is going to be a game changer. I'm sorry, I've never mentioned it to you before, but yeah, all the columns and whenever you're in those DRC screens, no matter where you're at, all those columns are sortable. So, you know, if you even just want to hit the assessment one, you know, I've got it filtered just for 11 right now, but if you want to, you know, hit the assessment one, so you're just seeing those 11s there. You can do status, you can do date, whatever you have there. You can totally sort those however you want to. So yeah, it's much easier to manage. I might not have mentioned it, Nikita, so I don't let me off the hook too much. Little things that you do kind of without thinking. It's you know, when you work in systems like that, sometimes you just naturally do it and don't think about the fact that other people might not realize it. You can enter students, again, either through the test management screens on DRC or through student management. You can do it both places. And I just want to note, when you're entering students in DRC, be really careful about spelling of first and last names and accuracy of birth date and gender. Those are the 4 data points that are used to export TABE scores automatically to LACES. So if all of those things match, your scores from DRC are going to automatically, the next business day, populate into the LACES system. If they don't, you'll have to manually enter them. So that's something that your data entry person will thank you for if you try your best to make sure that all of those things are exactly the same. One of the other things that we need to do is make sure that students understand all the features of the online testing platform before they start taking the test. And you can access the online tools training through the landing page on the DRC website. So I'm going to flip back to the landing page. You see here where it says access online tools training towards the bottom of that home screen. And there's actually a little link to a web portal. This takes you to what looks like the TABE test screen, but all that's available is online tools training. And if you click there, you've got online tools training for all the different subtests. I'm going to click on math and I'm going to click on level M. You can do standard or audio, so it can read to the students, or if you do the standard one, they just read it themselves. It says math, M-O-T-T, right? Type that right. And it lets you in. So what this does is it walks you through all of the options that you have. I'm going to flip through really quickly and just show you a couple things that I think are really important for students to know. It lets you do like a little fakey test, right? And you don't get scores for this. One of the things that happens is all of those little tools pop up. And I think sometimes our students don't realize that they have all these at their disposal. So like if you've got the line guide, they this in a reading test, that they can grab this and use it to track down the screen, which I think is so hard for some of our students. They've got the little X thing so they can eliminate answer choices. Ooh, that does a big thing right there. So there's a lot of different things available to them that they might not be aware of. I'm gonna zip. One of those is the on-screen protractor. And if your students don't know that it's there and don't know how to use it, you're going to want to make them aware of it, right? Because you can grab it and move it around, and then you grab it by either end and you can manipulate it or an angle. So that's something that we make sure that all of our students go through. I actually just recorded an overview of walking through the online tools training, so that we've got just a standardized little video that all of our students can watch before their first TABE test experience. It's about 14 minutes long, and it just walks through all the different tools and options that students have. Under the options, they've got lots of choices. Like if they don't like looking at the black on white, they can change their background color choices. They can actually do contrasting colors, so they can change the background and the text. They've got those all available to them without accommodations. And if we don't show them to them, they won't know they're there, and they might not benefit from it. So Sarah asked if I can show you how to do that again. Yes, maybe. To a clean screen. Go into DRC. It's just right on that DRC landing page under Access Online Tools Training. There's a link to take you into the online tools training. And once you click on online tools training here, the directions walk you through how to log in. So. A nice feature. And I think really necessary for some of our students. So reports, there's 2 different reports that you can pull for your testers. Individual portfolio report is an overview of all TABE tests the student has completed. It's just kind of like a snapshot of their scores, right? Scale score and NRS level for each test. The individual profile report is the one that you probably are all using. It gives you much more in-depth information on the profiles of student skills, including both the skills they demonstrated and the skills they need to build. Those are usually the ones that we use to start to build that student learning plan. But there are also other reports available to you outside of the reports tab in DRC. You can access a lot of information from the test management screen. So in the test management screen, you have the ability to export test session reports. I should have done this before I popped out of that screen. Do it again. Go back into test management and just show you where to pick up one of these reports. I really like being able to export the test session reports. And you can do that here with the little green arrow. And if you hover over it, it says export details. Okay. That gives you information about what tests the students have completed and how long they were active in each test. It's really helpful when you're trying to determine where students are at in their testing without having to actually kind of log into where they are. And it helps you know whether students are taking advantage of the testing time that they're given for TABE subtests. So if you sometimes get those weird results, you're not quite sure, like, did they really try? You can look and see how much time they spent on each subtest. And I actually pulled one of these out for one of our test sessions. I scrubbed the student information out of it so you don't have any names here, but it'll just show you. So I'm going to zoom in so it's maybe easier for you to see, and then we'll have to scroll over a little. So it shows you, sorry, the TABE test, that's our district code, we're Department of Labor, that's our school code, Cornerstones, and then this is the TABE 11 complete battery, right? So it tells you the test name, and then it also tells you their begin date, the begin date and end date for the test session. But more importantly, it tells you the start date and time and the completion date and time for each test. So I can go in here and see on this test, this student took about 15 minutes. Hopefully that was a locator test and not a full battery test. But you can scroll back and look at that too. And it tells you like this student has completed these tests. There might be some that they haven't started. So it's just kind of a handy snapshot for you to see what they're doing and not doing. One note here, the practice tests are listed here too. They do not have to take the practice tests. So a lot of the not starteds that you'll see will probably be your practice tests. This is a handy report for anybody who has to deal with any student record kinds of things. So, questions about that one? And then again, the records all export to LACES. So this is one of the places I go to double check and make sure that all the records that we have actually gotten into LACES. All right, I'm almost done talking and then it's going to be you guys' turn. Some quick reviews of just state assessment policy stuff, right? All assessments are valid up to 180 days from the date they're given. So that means if a student takes a TABE post-test in February 2022, that test is going to be valid until August 2022. So technically, I can push that test forward to use as a pre-test for next fiscal year, right? That's nice because it cuts down on the amount of testing that we have to do for our students who cross fiscal years just to be eligible for services in the new year. That 180-day validity period crosses fiscal years. Okay. That 180-day rule also covers assessment when a student stops out of your program for a period of time and then comes back. So if they've had a TABE test within the last 180 days, you don't necessarily need to reassess them if they re-enroll in your program. If they're transferring from one program to another, say from DOC back into one of our local programs, or maybe a student moves from Watertown to Pier. So they are moving from Lake area to the right turn. If they've had a TABE within 180 days, you can request those records from the program where they started, and you can use that TABE test as the pre-test for entry into your program too. Also want to think, could there be reasons where you'd want to get a new TABE test, even if the students have a score that's within that 180-day range? Can anybody think of any reasons why?
Pick me, pick me.
Tim, you have one?
Yeah, when they get sober.
Yep. If you've got anybody who comes to you and you say, okay, so what's different this time? They say, well, I'm not using anymore. Give them a new test. That's a indication they're going to be smarter than they were last time, right?
I was just thinking too, it's for us, we have students that come in and especially if they've just left a domestic violence situation or they're really struggling with mental health and then all of a sudden things are a little better, then they typically do much better.
Yeah, any kind of trauma in their past that they are now in a better place, that's a really good reason. I honestly think sometimes even like I've had people come out of corrections before and come into our program, and they might have a test from the prison system. And, you know, I talk to them about it sometimes and I say, so, you know, tell me, do you think it would be worth it for us to do another test? And they'll say, oh, yeah, because, you know, I was so stressed out because of this and this and this when I was, you know, in the facility, and I feel calmer now, I feel better now. So, you know, some of those things happen too. Yeah, anytime that they feel like they're in a better place, and you learn that hopefully through your enrollment process, definitely, I think there are advantages to going ahead and giving them another test. Now, if they're moving from Watertown to Huron and there hasn't been any trauma, right? They're moving to get a different job, whatever. I'm probably not going to worry that much about that one. But you definitely want to talk to your students and listen to them and make that judgment call about whether or not to do an additional test even if they're within that valid window. Sarah asked, stopped out versus left advantages. It depends on how I feel about it from day to day. It doesn't matter. They're the same thing for most of us, I think. So, again, you've got 40 hours between assessments for our ABE level learners, so NRS levels 1 through 4. And 30 hours between assessments for our ASE students, adult secondary students, so NRS levels 5 and 6. But again, we try and get that initial post-test as close to that hours mark as we can. And after that, you don't have to. There is not a rule that says you have to test every 40 hours, unless you feel in your professional judgment that progress has been made. So you do not have to feel like you have to constantly hit, like, okay, so we test after 40 hours, we test after 80 hours, we test after 120 hours. Not necessarily. It's okay to wait and see, right? You don't need a TABE test to see if your students are learning. You do a lot of other things to judge whether or not your students are learning. There are formative assessments. There are GED ready assessments. There are other things that you can do. You want to be cognizant of getting a TABE post-test at the end of the fiscal year if a student has not yet achieved a measurable skill gain. That's one thing I will say you do want to try and do. But other than that, use your professional wisdom to decide, is this the time to post-test or not? And again, because of the change in federal regulations that made it possible for our students to achieve an educational functioning level or a measurable skill gain by completing their GED, we sometimes don't have to have students take a post-TABE at all. If we have students in our program who are performing well in their initial TABE test, there are a lot of times that we move fairly quickly within their instructional window to taking some GED ready tests to see how close they are to being able to pass those final GEDs. And if they're test ready, we might not make a post-TABE a priority for those students, even if they hit that 30 or 40 hour mark in our classes, because those students can evidence a gain by passing all of the 4 GED final subtests. And a post-TABE in that case could be considered redundant, right? Stephanie said, with that being said, we have prep students who want to take it because they want the incentive. And if they're motivated by that, 100%, go ahead and give it to them. Doesn't hurt me a bit, right? And again, there are other pros and cons to consider when focusing on GED completion rather than post-TABE for educational functioning levels or measurable skills gains. So what are there other ones that you can think of? Stephanie already mentioned our prep students do get an incentive for completing that additional TABE test. Are there any other things you can think of that are pros and cons to think about when we're thinking about GED completion versus post-TABE to show that progress?
Sometimes we're using it because even after they've taken a GED, because they have studied with us longer and they're preparing for an AccuPlacer, and we want to see where they're falling at on that scale for college preparedness.
That's a great point, Steph. Yep, that's another good one. Anybody else have instances where they, or things that they use to determine whether they might use the GED as a measure or the TABE as a measure?
There are some, I know tech schools for sure will take TABE results as entrance sometimes. And so that kind of goes along with Stephanie's thing, if they're preparing for post-secondary or something like that, that there's another reason.
I think the important thing to remember always is you're working with people, right? Work with your students, think about their specific needs, talk to them. They've got opinions, they'll tell you their opinions most of the time, and just kind of talk through. And the other thing to remember too is, you're not going to mess this up so bad that you can't fix it in the end, right? If you think, oh, we'll do GEDs and you find yourself getting close to the end of the fiscal year and they're still kind of coming up short on one of their tests, you can still give them a TABE post test. It's fine. You're going to be able to do that and it'll be okay. The only time that we're ever in trouble is when they disappear, and that happens all the time, and we don't have control of that anyway. So that would be the only time that I think we couldn't fix it, right? All right, this might be the fastest T3 ever if you guys don't start talking more, because here we are on my slide that's inviting you to really talk. Are there other questions or other tips or any discussion about the TABE test, the assessment policy, assessment in general?
Do believe that a lot of times frustration that I heard, like at ANI, for those who participated in the ANI, one of the things they said was because the TABE doesn't align with the GED, that they're two different things, and trying to think about them differently in that respect, because they're serving a different purpose. It's unfortunate in some respects that they're not aligned, because it would save us another assessment for the student and all that. But if we're looking at it, you know, GED ready versus.
Yep. How's everybody gauging that? I mean, you know, it used to be, I know in our program, we'd look at that grade equivalent and we'd say, you know, anything about 8 and up, we figured people were pretty close. Now, we really, I mean, certainly people who are scoring in NRS levels 4, 5, and 6, we're feeling like they're pretty close to being GED ready, but we're seeing sometimes even people at NRS level 3 are showing us that they're GED ready in at least a subject or 2. What is everybody else finding with that?
We kind of look at scale score, and we're looking at that 550 range.
Okay. Yep, and Sarah's saying I've had some people who are in that M level pass recently. I keep waiting for somebody to put out a study where they've done a correlation, but I haven't seen one yet. I mean, the test company's not going to do that. I'm talking like one of us.
I swear, 700 years ago, before COVID, there was a group that was trying to come up with some correlations. And I know they were frustrated that there wasn't, that they were seeing yet, but then they thought maybe there wasn't enough information.
Says, I've been wondering if First Contact are not doing their best work. And I think that's always, you know, that's something I guess that we haven't talked about yet is, you know, how are we presenting this test to students, and what are we telling them before they take that first one, right? What is the purpose we're saying we're filling by doing the TABE assessment right off the bat? We had these discussions even more than 100 years ago. This is probably like 250 years ago in our program, with a particular staff person who no longer works for us, but was a good staff person. I don't want to lead anybody to believe this was bad, right? But you know, was talking about like, well, the first thing we have to do is make you take this test. It's just because we need the score. No, it's not. I mean, it kind of is sometimes, but don't tell the students that, right? The reason we're doing this test is because we need to know exactly what things you already know. You're good at some things. We know that. You know stuff. So we need to know, what do you need to know? What do you already know? Because I don't want to spend time teaching you what you already know. Your time and my time are too valuable for that. And then we want to know, what do you still need to learn in order to get ready for those GED tests? Because we want to focus your class time on the skills you still need, not on the skills you already have, right? Oh, Stephanie says, I tell them it holds the teacher's feet to the fire and shows that they are giving them good instruction. This is a test that we're using to test the teachers, not the students. It gives us a starting point and a way to look at strengths and weaknesses. Yep. Yeah, we need to know that pattern of strengths and needs for our students. And I always tell them, you know, this is like the least stressful test you'll ever take, because all I want you to do is go in and do your best. And if you know how to do something, great, you're going to answer those questions correctly. And if something is hard and it feels like you're struggling, it's okay, because that's exactly what I want to know. I want to know what's hard for you so that I can make sure you get into classes where we can help you learn it. yeah, I think framing the test in a lot of ways can help to get that student performance up there a little bit, to get that student buy-in going. And then, you know, like Stephanie said, then we have to hold our own feet to the fire, right? You have to then use those results to help them decide where you're going to go into class and what are you going to do when you get there. So we have to be accountable on the back end then. Oh, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I like hearing other people's too, because you know, you get your spiel, right? I got my whole speech that I give to incoming students when I'm the one doing their intake and their enrollment process and getting that initial TABE appointment set up. But I love hearing other people's and how they sell students on the TABE test. It's part of the art side, you know, when John Anderson talks about the art and science of adult education. This is on the art side here. This is our marketing skills at work. Here's why you should feel good about taking a big long test.
Car salesman, right? Used car salesman.
At this test, it runs like a dream.
Kick the tires.
Is everybody, are you giving the complete battery right away to your students, or are you doing a subtest at a time? How's everybody using that? Students who come over Christmas to take a post-TABE because they know they learned. There you go.
Yeah, Renee just fibbed on that one. But I will just say that we don't give them the language part of the test.
Right?
We give them reading and math, and then we give them the old TABE 910 by pencil and paper to test their language. And it was just a decision we made to kind of keep costs down and it seems to work well for us. And we give that to them later on so that it's not quite such a long test.
Yeah, yeah. We have a policy that anybody who comes to us who's under 18 takes the complete battery, because we want to make sure we know exactly where they stand on everything. So they're taking everything before they start with us. It's part of our enrollment process for people who are under 18 who tell us they're going to come here and things are going to be different, right? It's a little bit of a hoop to jump through for them, just to make sure they're really committed before they get accepted into the program. A lot of times we had kind of gone to this just right before COVID, because we were worried that having them do 2 or 3 appointments that were just coming in and taking tests at the very beginning of their experience with us was discouraging people from coming back. So, you know, we had gone kind of to, okay, so let's pick a subtest and let's do that subtest first. Let's get you into a class. Let's get you going. And then once you're established with us and we've got a comfort level and a trust level, we'll go back and we'll give you some other subtests. Karen says, I have prep students take the whole test. That's another subgroup that I think it's important that they probably do all the subtests. So yeah, that's another group that we try and have take the complete battery tests as well.
Any other comments, suggestions, questions before we leave today?
I have a question that is probably not, I'm missing something. I do a lot, never mind. So when I go to get the language test, I can never find my students in the language for their
Oh, their ticket?
yes, for their ticket. That math and reading, no problems. Language, I don't know why, but I'm the only one that has that problem. I know, I'm sorry.
No, you're not. Okay, so I'm not sure I can show this without showing our student names. I'll try and do it fast.
Don't show out student names, Becky, if it's because we are recording, it'll go
Oh,
up.
true. Okay.
Please don't.
I will do my best. So, okay, when you go in and you're going to get those test tickets, one of the things that happens, let me do it offline and I'll see if I can clip it out.
I always go incognito because they say that makes it easier, but I still have issues with it.
Trying to make it show. Oh, well, let's try this one. Surely no one is enrolled in this one. I'm trying to find a test session. Here we go. All right. On one where the only person in is test student. So they're not our student really. That's the person you have to put in as a placeholder when you create a test session. So if they're not showing, one of the things to do is go here and try and get them into, like, go to the locator test or go to the practice test and hit filter. And then that student might show up. A lot of it is this status by module is somehow filtering it down and filtering people out. So a lot of times I find it more, Karen, not on the language test, but on the complete battery test. Like I have to go in and pick like the reading locator test for that one in that status by module and then hit filter and then they'll all pop up. So does that help at all?
Well, it's nice to know that I'm not the only one who has
You're not
issues
the
with
only
it.
one. You are not the only one. It's an issue. I have that issue too, because every once in a while, it's just like, it's a fight to even get the right name to pop up on that test ticket status. So no, you're not the only one. Put your mind at ease on that score. So yeah, that was a good question. Remember, you can find a lot of resources in the DRC Insight portal on the landing page. And again, under the general information tab, you'll find a lot of documentation. That's where the administration manuals are, the test direction manuals are. The other place I would remind you to go is, looking for my chat window, I must have closed it. I'm gonna put it in the chat. tabetest.com. If you go to tabetest.com, there are a lot of resources for TABE 11 and 12. That's where you'll find things like this thing that has all the maximum allowable testing times. So if you're trying to schedule a student in and you know you want them to take the reading test along with the locator test times are down at the bottom, the reading test times are here. So you know, okay, part 1, the maximum time is 50 minutes, part 2, the maximum time is 50 minutes, and it's going to be 35 minutes for the locator test. So when a student says, well, how much time do I need? It could be up to, right, 145 minutes. Now, are they going to test faster than that? Generally, yes, especially on that reading test, they give them so much time. But finding resources like this, you can get those off of that tabetest.com website under resources.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
Sharing with us today.
Thank you.
And
any questions, or you run into anything weird, I think you all have my email and my phone number, but you always know you can contact me. So.
We'll see you next month, where it's going to be ESL related training. So watch your emails for information coming up. Everyone have a nice day.
Thanks, guys.